Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford. And tell me, was the sound as deafeningly loud for all of you out there as it was in my headphones, or do we have a generalized audio problem? Is it just my darn mic levels? Let me know. Anyway, hey, welcome. We're going to be talking about all the usual stuff today, but in particular, we'll be doing our destructive show. And I just noticed as I was going through the topic on everything, we're probably going to hit everything that gets us banned off YouTube in a matter of about 5 minutes in terms of all the hot words, which I'm not going to say right now. But this is a fun one, and it's going to be about all sorts of destructive things for once. Usually we're telling you about how to safeguard your data, to get your comics done, things like that. And now we're going to tell you how to absolutely destroy things because there are reasons, and some of them are even good. Anyway, and Andre says, yes, wow, we have sound. Okay, so I assume that's not blindingly awful sound, so we'll take it. Anyway, hey, speaking of Andre, hello, welcome, and I'll be giving you a little bit of news toward the end of the show about your log question. It's good news, so we'll do that. Oro from Minneapolis is joining us, all 31 degrees and cloudy, I'd say. Honestly, it's not really that bad for Minneapolis in January. Mike Beam, Jeff Schultz, welcome everyone. Phoenix, welcome in, guys. Xandu Comics from Seattle, and Ed Billiot, Tim Kilbreath. It looks like Ed. I believe you're up in Canada, aren't you? I can't forget. And Steve says loud sound. Yes, let me do what I can on the mic level on this one. Give me just a second on this one. See if I can't get that down just a little bit. Let me know if that's any better. Okay, so I took her down there. If not, I can try other things. But and our mod is joining us just a little bit late, so we'll see what we can do on that. Hopefully we don't get too spammed while we're doing it. All right, anyway, guys. A quick bit of comic-based news, then we'll get on to the destruction. I guess the new YouTube stuff is you don't want to swear or do anything controversial in the first couple minutes of your show, otherwise bad things happen. We're not monetized anyway, so I don't think it has any fear for us. But we'll see what happens in terms of the shadow banning or whatever else these kids do these days. Let me focus my camera up here. You can probably see my awesome Life During Wartime thing in the upper right-hand corner there, but let's focus a little bit closer to home. All right, yeah, all right, we'll take it from there. Okay, guys, so a little bit, by the way, before I get too sidetracked, heck with that framing. Before we get too confused about other things, please hit the like and subscribe if this is the sort of thing that you get into, and we'll try to bring more of it for you. And tell your friends. We're trying to spread the word and get our subscribers up over the next big round number, and we'll take it from there. All right, so. And ComicBase news, real briefly, there's new build out. I don't even have the number in front of me right now, but if you guys are following the intermediate builds, I finally put out the release notes for everything we've done since our last quarterly update and this one. Some of the highlights are better handling of particularly submissions of newspapers and newspaper pictures. We just now implemented a split for the logs so that we've been getting so many submissions of data in the last couple weeks. You guys probably know it's been absolutely psychotic. We've had 2 weeks in a row with over 40,000 new items. I think there were 189,000 changes, price changes on the last update alone. I mean, just crazy amounts of activity on the whole thing, and just the logs that we're trying to keep track of them. They were getting so unwieldy you couldn't open them in most text editors. It was that bad. So we've now made it so that when you go and you look at the update logs, or you click on the what's new in the dialog that appears after you do an update, it splits it up into the different types of media: books, comics, magazines, and newspapers. They each have their own sublog file with all the changes in that. And we've also done some mojo so that if Um, for instance, you're coming in from a completely blank database and you decide, I'm going to download all 2.2 million newspapers that we have now in ComicBase, and you wind up with a 2.2 million line log. Uh, we've done some mojo so that at least if you open this up with a text editor like Notepad++, that it won't blow up your computer. Most web browsers have a hard time opening something that's that big. Although I understand that Opera, the geeky browser preferred by the technically savvy amongst us, apparently that's the one browser that can reliably open stupidly large, HTML files. But if all else fails, please go ahead and just use a text browser like Notepad++, or you could just say, heck with the log, I'll just enjoy the changes and I don't need to review every darn thing. It's all a matter of style. All right, so let's see here. Oh, and Andre informs me it is build 2149. Thank you for that. Honestly, I've been running between different things. I did not even have a chance to check. Oh, yes, and this is, yes, up in Toronto, Canada. All right, I thought so. My memory's not completely shot. Oh, by the way, if you're wondering, yes, I do have some kind of cold or allergies or something. It's one of those things where the weather was like trying to kill us all 2.5 weeks ago by freezing us all to death. And then an early spring came, followed by tons and tons of wet weather and hot stuff. And I think it's, fooled all the plant life into saying, hey, that stuff that Pete's allergic to, instead of waiting until February or May, let's just drop it all into the air now. So that's probably what I'm doing right now. And so Zyrtec is taking its while to do its thing. So bear with me, guys, and enjoy the highly nasal approach. All right, so very briefly, otherwise, we sent out a note to anyone who bought a wireless scanner in the latest bunch. Apparently, they did a firmware update at the factory, which they didn't tell us about, which changed the need for one of the config settings in our setup sheet to change. So if you were an affected person, you just got an email about that. If you're not, don't worry about it. But basically, there's one more code you need to scan when setting the darn thing up. And yes, we sent a nasty gram to the vendor on that one. If time allows, I'm going to tell you a very involved story about Von Bode. And the saga of the Macron character, which is what the little bar over the E in his name means, and how much joy that's brought into our lives over here at ComicBase Central. I'm going to save that one if things are getting slower, if I've still managed to hold on by the end of talking about hard drive destruction. But if not, we'll save that one for another time. And most importantly, please put your questions in the chat if you have any. Put them to @ComicBase TV, and we'll hit as many as we can. But anyway, on to the show. So when we were doing our tech tips section over this one, and by the way, let me see if I can cue this one up, because I'm just so proud of having built the darn little animations. The darn it, you're going to see them if I've got them. Let me just cue this up. All right, and going over to the hyperdeck. Wham! Securely retiring our hard drive. All right. Yes. These are the things that, like, when I finally get my act together, I'm going to have these set up so that I can actually queue them up, and they'll be part of a, graphic that flies in from one side of the screen or not. But man, oh man, it's been busy. I've not had a chance to get that done. But all right. So we've been burning through computers over here at ComicBase. I think we killed 4 different desktops in the last 3 months. We just, took them out, stripped them for parts, determined that they weren't going to, meet any need we had in the foreseeable future. And so we decided, okay, well, what can we save out of this thing? And if there's nothing, screw it. We just got to get rid of it. But one thing you might have noticed, and especially if you've upgraded your own computer in recent years, is the hard drives are remarkably problematic, because let's say it's a computer that you want to donate, right? You can go ahead, install Windows on it, or hit reset my PC, set back to a factory normal state where it doesn't ostensibly have any of your private data showing out and everything else like that. But the truth is, all your data is still there. It's been deleted, which is to say they've ripped the names. It's like if you had a book and you rip the table of contents out. Any of the table of contents entries that point to your data, those are all gone. But if you were to flip into the physical text of the book and just start reading, or if you just start to go to random sectors on those hard drives, or use a drive recovery utility, all of your data is still there on the drive. So it's really nervous. giving rid of an old computer like that. And it's not even any better if you've got a computer that you want to get rid of where you don't want to give it to anyone. It's just going out in the dump. What we wound up with over here at ComicBase is we wound up with a stack of hard drives. It was like this tall. It's like 8 or 9 hard drives that were all just stripped from different computers. They were all 1, 2, 4 terabytes. Nothing interesting to us. We weren't going to ever use them again in a new computer. Everything we're doing these days is SSD based, but we can't let these hard drives get out in the wild. Because one of the biggest ways to steal data in the universe is, and you can buy, scavenged hard drives off eBay. Sometimes people buy, copiers, that'll have, I don't know if you guys knew this, but if you have one of those big digital copiers, like a Xerox or something like that, it's got a hard drive in it. And in that hard drive is an image of everything that copier has ever copied. So all those secret documents that you've been, all those, business plans, everything else like that, unless you do special things to it, those are actually just sitting there in the computer's hard drive waiting to be reimaged, because that's what powers the idea of saying, print me 5 copies of this, collated thing, is it's image them, save them, and then you can recall the copy later on. But one of the best ways to do corporate espionage and things like that is just, hey, I see that company X is selling their old copiers, and they're being scrapped or whatever else like that. Let's see if I can get the hard drives out of them. Same thing goes for old computers. You don't want those hard drives flying around, but getting rid of them is crazily hard. So let me talk a little bit about what doesn't work, and then we'll get into what you can do. Let's see here. Counted books, okay. We'll get into the question on calendars if we haven't did it right after we get down the other things. All right. Hey, to Larry, who came in late. Okay, so so let's have a look at a hard drive here. I've got one right here. All right, so this is a 3.5-inch hard drive. I'm sorry, 3.5-inch hard drive. Fits in your standard bays like this. This one is a Seagate. Where is this thing from? This is a 8 terabyte one, dating from, looking for the manufacture date on it. Not immediately seeing it, but not particularly relevant right now. This one was in the pile that is potentially useful to us someday. So this one I don't intend to kill. I just want to use it to kind of show you what you're dealing with. All right. A hard drive is the steel encased, box. You see all the screws around here, the top, bottom, the sides, everything here is steel. This thing is hardy as hell. And on the back side of it, you got a little bit of a circuit board here that draws power. That's the power is the big one over here. The data is the little one over there. But basically, that's how it connects with your computer. But the actual business of this hard drive is on the platters that are inside. And one thing that you want to look at on this whole thing, if you look at the shape, it's got this circular part up here, and it's got this squarish part down at the bottom. And that squarish part corresponds to where the circuit board and the connectors are to the whole thing. But right in the middle of that spindle right there, that's the business of where the spinning discs are. Now, I think I can show you what these things look like when they're taken apart, because I think I was smart enough to save a picture of that. And let me see if I can get... Yeah, here we go. Let's pull that up. All right, so here is a Maxtor hard drive, but basically they all look and work the same. Getting them apart is a bear. It's typically you're going to need there's a couple of mounts on there. This is for love of God, you'll violate your warranty if you ever take this screw out. So you'll of course have to scratch all those labels off. Get to the Torx screws that are underneath them. If you don't have a Torx screwdriver, that's a little 5-pointed guy of the appropriate size. You'll need to go and find those tools. Then you got to remove a whole ton of screws and take the circuit board off. Finally, you can see the inside of the whole thing. The business over here is all about these spinning metal platters right there. And they really are metal platters. Now, the thing that's floating above it here, this actuator, that is the hard drives, it's the head. That's the thing you hear going as it goes and seeks up and down the hard drive as the hard drive spinning. That's the sound you're hearing, is the sound of this thing bopping back and forth. And that's stabilized by some pretty powerful magnets, which are about the only cool thing you can scavenge if you decide to take this thing apart. So anyway, the magnets are this bit right here, this little curvy bit. So if you do decide to take a hard drive apart, that's the one thing I'd say, yeah, steal that one out there. It makes a dandy fridge magnet because they're actually pretty powerful. They're a rare earth magnet. Other than that, you go ahead and disassemble the actuator. That'll let you get to the platters themselves. There's usually a stack of them, usually about 4 of them mounted on here. These big shiny metal things. They're beautifully mirror-like in their surface. And if they're not, that means your hard drive went south because you had what's called a head crash. A head crash is what happens if you ever manage to bounce this hard drive up and down while this actuator is floating microns above it, which is reading the magnetic resonance that's coming, from the drive. um, that buffer between the surface of this thing and the spinning platter underneath it it's measured in micrometers. And so if you ever manage to bap your computer enough so it wobbles the hard drive into this thing as it's going and zipping across, it will go and scratch the surface of the disk, and that disk will never be the same again. And anything that was on that scratched surface is pretty much dead. That's where you will hear a horrible sound from your hard drive, and nothing in your life will ever be the same if that happens. That being said, most of your hard drive data is still there for anyone who cares enough to read it, but you won't want to use that hard drive yourself. And here's an example of someone who's using the magnets to hang stuff up. All right, so that's what you're dealing with when you're trying to disable these suckers. So let's talk about why what you're doing ahead of time doesn't work to get rid of these things safely. So as I mentioned before, it's like when you think about a disk, the files on a disk, your hard drive is going to hold some number of terabytes of information, and it is really, really expensive in terms of time for your computer to to get rid of that data. If you said I want to delete a file and it actually went and wrote zeros over every place where that file had been, that would take forever. So the computer guys, being clever folks that they are, they figured, hey, I don't actually have to spend, if it's an 8 GB file, I don't need to write 8 GB worth of zeros in order to delete the thing. All I got to do is find its entry in my table of contents of what files are on the disk, mark that thing as unused, go to my little directory of all the sectors on the hard disk, say, yeah, everything where this was, yeah, just mark it as, yeah, it's up for grabs now. You can reuse the space. And I don't actually need to go to all those locations and write zeros over them. And so, really what happens then is when you're deleting a file, it's really just, even when you empty the trash, if until you empty the trash, it doesn't even delete the, it doesn't even mark the stuff as unused. But when you empty the trash, it just marks all the the space in its table of contents as, okay, this is available spaces. Next time you need to write a file, grab a space at random and you can start writing there. But most of the file, if you stopped right then and there and say, hey, whoa, I did not mean to delete that file even though I emptied the trash, and you run a file undelete utility, most of the time, if you do it quickly after you delete something, it can just pop the file right back into existence, because all it does is say, hey, what files are marked as deleted now? Let me undelete them for you and see if they still exist at the space where you had they'd been marked as being before. So anyway, that's it's good for you if you accidentally throw things away. It's terrible for you if you are deleting things you need them to stay deleted. Now, if you need them to stay deleted, you at minimum want to go the next extra step, which is to say you want to not just delete the files, you want to not just reset your PC or whatever the standard things that they're built into Macs or Windows do, but you want to use a utility which actually, it's called, securely erases the files. Now, what those will do is they will go and actually, if I delete a big file, it'll actually go to where that file was, take all the sectors on the disk where that was part of, and write zeros on them. Sometimes if you run an NSA approved secure delete thing, they'll write all zeros, then they'll write all ones, then they'll write a random patterns of zeros and ones, and they'll do it like 3 more times, and then they'll write zeros again. And the reason they do that is to defeat the idea of magnetic resonance. I wrote it down because magnetic force microscopy, because just because you wrote a zero, remember, you're writing what's meant to be digital data, but you're writing it on an analog medium. I mean, magnetic particles have a certain amount of resistance, and they have a certain amount, that you're either going to magnetize them or you're not, but they don't go from 0 to 1 in the real world, they have a certain amount of magnetic charge, or they have less than a certain threshold of magnetic charge, and your computer just interprets that as a 0 1. Now, if you're using something that's actually capable of measuring the magnetic charge along all those things, well, that turns out magnetizing it as a 1 a bunch of times is, just like if you've ever like tried to make your own magnets, and by rubbing a magnet on a piece of steel, you can actually magnetize the steel that way. Well, if you do it a lot, you get a stronger magnetic field off the steel than if you do it a few times, right? Well, the same thing applies to your hard drive particles. Your hard drive is just interested, are they above or below a certain threshold that they figure will switch when they turn the force on or off, which, that's fine, if you're, for all a hard drive does. But if you're really trying to hide what was there, then it's almost like, think about it, like if you're writing on a pad of paper and you're just, scribbling, I must kill the boss, like that, just running an eraser over that, you might, get it so on the last piece of paper that, it doesn't say I must kill the boss anymore, but you'll still have the impression of all those times you wrote I must kill the boss, beaten through the texture of the paper, which, if you rub it over with a pencil or something like that, you'll still say, oh, hey, look, this person is not feeling very happy towards his employer today. Same thing happens there. So like if you really, really want to get back this stuff, typically they'll say, yeah, you need to write over the thing multiple times, like 5 times. Now, there's a problem with that, in that, first of all, it's a pain in the butt, right? And on a big hard drive, it's you got to download special utilities for doing this. If you are interested in doing this sort of thing, the one I'd probably point everyone to as a default is a thing called DBAN, DBAN. You can go to dban.org and find it there for free. It stands for Derek's Boot and Nuke. Basically, what it will do is it'll let you make a little USB drive where if you pop it onto your computer, it boots off of that. It's a little, I believe it's a little Linux kernel, and then it says, all right, I see some hard drives attached to this one. Which one did you want me to kill? And then it will just repeatedly write random patterns of 1s and 0s all over the hard drive and just nuke the living daylights out of it. That does a pretty good job. It takes forever. Unless you got like a day to just spend writing 0s and 1s on a large hard drive, you're not going to want to do it. It's just too much trouble. And even then, there's limits that, depending on your things, depending on your needs, you might not want to count on that for. But for all practical purposes, if you've done that to your hard drive, absolutely feel free to donate your old computer to Goodwill. You're fine at that point. You're good. Nothing, no one's going to come back to you and say, oh, hey, I saw what you were looking at in your browser history. That's not a thing that's going to happen. So as a practical matter, if you've got the time to do it, something like that, go for it. That's a perfectly good way to go. Other people, famously, as I was looking up the history recently of people who've killed hard drives, which there's a surprising amount of in the news if you go back, I don't know, 6 years. Oh, you might have heard programs like BleachBit, wiping like with a cloth, I would say in particular, just stick with like DBAN, keep it easy, kids. And again, remember magnetic force microscopy. So if you're actually worried about a state level actor, at that point, I'll put it this way, if the thing you're wiping out is just like your old cooking recipes, you're good. Don't worry about it. You're perfectly fine. If the worst thing that could ever happen if someone really goes to town on your hard drive is the uncover mom's apple crumble recipe, you know what? You're going to pull through. If, on the other hand, it's something that like is either 30 years of your life's work, like I don't know, the source code to ComicBase, or if it's something that could send you to jail for 30 years in a federal pen, you might want to go to other methods. And here we enter the realm of physical hard drive destruction. So let's talk about the ways that the pros get rid of things. And by the way, with us just here in ComicBase, when we had 8 drives to get rid of, we were not going to spend a week just running DBAN, getting rid of hard drives so we could throw them in the garbage safely. That is not a decent use of employee time. Yeah, we look for ways to get rid of these things that are both faster and frankly more fun, and do a more thorough job. And so let's talk about a few of those. All right. So When the federal government wants to get rid of stuff like this, they use usually what's called a degausser. So if you get an NSA standard degausser, basically it looks like a large metal box. You want to operate this far away. I mean far away from your other equipment, because this thing is in the business of generating very strong magnetic fields. Basically what you do is there's a lower door. You sit the drive that you want degaussed into the lower drive. You close the door on the thing, you step back, you turn the thing on, you let the thing run for a while. And what it will do is it will generate lots and lots of very high magnetic forces. The NSA approved ones cost about $19,000, and they will generate them both positive and negative polarity, and they'll throw them randomly at the whole thing, and they will beat the living hell out of any data that had previously been on the platters of those disks. At that point, yeah, no, when the NSA wants to get rid of drives, or the government, or if you work for a government agency and you say, "Hi, I'm retiring this computer," all those things, if they're ever going to be used again, get thrown on a hand truck and taken over to a place where one of those degaussers goes to work on them. They do a fine job. I've heard theoretical arguments, depending on the thoroughness of the degausser, that there's still ways to get things back. But honestly, if you've got an NSA level 1 that's going to town on it, it ain't coming back. I mean, there's no way. That being said, there are also people who sell $49 versions of this one, where it's like a little magnetic wand you're meant to rub over things, like you want to erase a cassette tape or something. That one is not going to do anything like the same amount of damage to the whole thing, mostly because it's mostly deflected, unless you disassemble your hard drive, by the hard drive's case itself. Remember, underneath it, I mean, this thing is a tank, and it isn't until you disassemble the tank that you even get to the things you're trying to demagnetize. I mean, you might fry something on the circuit board over here, but that's, if I've got a copy of the same hard drive, I can reassemble a hard drive, take it into a clean room, transport your other platters into my cloned hard drive, and probably do a decent job reading what was left on the whole thing. So, I mean, if you're getting serious about this whole thing, yeah, do the hand degaussing ones. First of all, that's a non-starter. They just don't do the job to armored things like this. But yeah, for the ones that you want, they cost a hell of a lot of money. And even, so I would say that's the main thing that would keep you away from doing it. Disassembly. All right. If you see on the forums, the recommended way for civilians to get rid of these things is to, get a tiny Torx screwdriver, take apart all the appropriate, screws on the whole thing. You saw the steps that are required to do the whole thing. Then get out the platters involved with the whole thing, smash them with a hammer, and throw all the crap in the garbage when you're all done. You know what? It works great. You got 20 minutes per hard drive. That is the way to go for sure. It requires an investment of only your time and a Torx wrench, and it'll work. So the only thing I'd say, it's not particularly fun. So let's talk fun, because honestly, if we're just going to destroy things, I think fun ought to be part of the equation. A lot of people think, hey, look, I'm going to take a sledgehammer to it. And I'm going to say about that one is, look, if that's your workout, it's a great job. You are going to work so hard though to really mess this thing up, unless you're really working the sledge. It's again, as a strength workout, it's aerobic. It'll build your upper body. Absolutely go to town on the whole thing. Watch your toes, if you're sledging with the whole thing. But get ready to spend some time on it. I've done it. It's not particularly easy. These things are not made of glass. I have also tried throwing them from a height. All right. And I'm not going to say whether I actually did this, but I'm going to say, if you were of a mind to throw a hard drive or a server or a computer or anything else from a large height in order to destroy it, I'd say you have certain safety responsibilities that I think you ought to take very seriously. And I am being very serious about this right now. I'd say number one, you need multiple spotters in the area below where you are going to be, throwing, to make sure that absolutely no one is going to walk anywhere near where you're hurtling a deadly heavy piece of equipment onto the presumably very, very hard ground below you. You also, I'd say, have responsibility to the property owner that you are throwing this onto. assuming that it is private property, or, well, frankly, if it's anyone's property, you want to be hitting something heavy. You're going to be hitting it with something heavy. And if you're doing it from the height that is necessary to do what you want to do to this thing, it's probably going to leave a mark. So make sure that someplace that they're not going to mind that you left a ginormous divot in their concrete. Because if you're not leaving a ginormous divot in their concrete, you probably haven't thrown it hard enough to get done what you want done. But that being said, if you have that available to you, and I'd say you're probably looking at a minimum of 4 stories to really get the job done in any kind of reliable way, and you can fulfill the appropriate safety requirements and not do the damage to the property that you're throwing onto or killing one in the process, I'd say that the fun factor on that one is decent. Not that I have necessarily ever destroyed old servers that way at all. But let's talk about something that we have done, which honestly doesn't work at all. It's looked cool, but I was just kidding myself when we did it. Running these over with a car, even if it's like a Chevy Tahoe, nah. There's every chance in the world you could run over this thing all day long, and you probably would shatter the circuit board, but beyond that, doing absolutely no damage to the drive as a whole. Your mileage will vary if you are running, say, I don't know, a fire truck or a steam engine over it. I think a steam engine, any kind of road grading equipment, I think you're in substantially better, shape on. But if that's not part of your arsenal down at your local garage, then save yourself the time. I mean, it looks cool, but if you're actually trying to, make the hard drive safe, for the, being out in the world, that's not the way to go. All right, so now let's talk about things that really do work. If you have access to an industrial shredder, this is the sort of thing that they use for getting rid of scrap metal. You might have seen them. Well, usually you see them at the ends of horror movies, where somehow the hero winds up being dangling on the edge of one of these things, as all the old, structural steel is being recycled into smaller chunks or something like that. Obviously, if you have access to something like that, I'd say that is the absolute gold standard. I'd say that beats degaussing in a heartbeat, because you will reduce every bit of that drive to many, many splinters, none of which, they will all be twisted. Their magnetic material would have been shredded to the winds. That is as close to vaporizing them almost as you can ever get. I'm going to say in the conventional world, that is absolutely the gold standard for getting rid of a hard drive. The problem is I have never in real life had access to something like that. And if you want to bring them to a hard drive recycling center, there's a certain trust issue. Now, if they say, hey, yeah, no, we run them through through an industrial shredder, I'm be saying on one hand, that's great. Industrial shredder, that's exactly what Bickford said to do with your hard drive. On the other hand, if I was holding, I don't know, bank records, credit cards, something that would throw me in jail for 30 years, and I'm thinking, I'm going to hand this thing over to the minimum wage employee who swears, he does, that he's going to feed it to the industrial shredder without making a copy or scanning or looking at beforehand, I would have doubts. I prefer solutions that I can watch the entire thing from beginning to end with a chain of custody that is, if they had a thing at the local recycling center where you get to throw your own drive into the big recycling, thing of death, then I honestly, I'd pay money for that. No problem at all. The problem is, when you go to the industrial recycling place around any place I've ever been, it's usually you pay some kind of recycling fee. You pay, to get the guy to do it. So I just paid $40 to get this old computer recycled. Typically they say, well, yeah, we'll strip it of all the bad stuff so nothing gets back in the waste stream, and then we'll take the hard drive and we'll securely destroy them for you. And again, I just can't get over the idea that, I got a bunch of minimum wage guys here that I don't know from Adam that are going to be handling all this stuff, and how much do I trust them? So that's where I come down on that one. But now, finally, let's go to 2 methods that I recommend absolutely wholeheartedly. They're just too much fun, and they get the job done beautifully. The first one, I believe I have a demo of. Let's see here. Yeah, let's go to the video on this one. Oh, just get. Okay, so let's pause it right there and just marvel at the wonders of what we are seeing. So what we're seeing here is a thing called thermite. Thermite is a reaction between iron oxide and basically rust. It's aluminum and red oxide, which is basically rust. What they're doing here is they've mixed this up, and they're putting in a flower pot there for reasons we'll get to in a minute here. They're putting the mixture right above where their hard drive cage was, and that stuff you see leaking down the board is the slag from where it just absolutely melted through the hard drive. Um, because thermite, which is fun stuff, it burns at about 5,000 degrees, and when it kicks off, it's used like its real life uses when you're not just using it for like fun like this. Real life uses include things like welding railroad ties out in the woods. Like, so I'm on a crew and there's a loose railroad tie that needs to be replaced, and it's 16 miles from the nearest intersection, and I'm not going to be able to bring my welder out there or anything like that to get it done. Whereas you can march, you can hike your crew out there with the whole thing, set the thing in place, and and weld it into place just by throwing a charge of thermite on both ends of the whole thing, and then it will become one with the rails next to it. um, um, Thermite, honestly, it's one of those things, like, ever since I heard about what it was in chemistry class, I just, of course, had to try it, because it was always one of those things that, like, it always seemed really, really, like, sketch, like, oh my God, it's like, you can't tell high schoolers how to make this stuff. But no, it's just black or blue iron oxide, and combined with aluminum. So, yeah, and the cool thing on this one, and I found out later on, let me see. Yeah, here we are. Pop this guy up there. You can buy it as a kit. um, so yeah, iron oxide and fine aluminum, basically half a pound each. Mix them together, and you set them off with a like a magnesium, either a magnesium flare, like a flare you get from like a sparkler works, for this whole thing. But honestly, I prefer like a propane torch, like you get from Home Depot, for doing like soldering. Big soldering, not like little electronic soldering, but like one of those little, kickoff torches. I'm going to say, before you do this sort of thing, wear your safety glasses. Don't be a freaking idiot. And let's talk a little bit about what, the safety precautions of being around something that's going to be 5,000 degrees are. All right. Again, I'm assuming we're all adults here and we don't want to kill ourselves. So number one, eye protection, like for real. I mean, and you also ideally want to have UV protection on. So if you've got welders goggles, now's your time. Because when the thing is going, if you're stupid enough to look at the thing as it's going, you are going to be catching a crap ton of UV radiation right through your eyeballs, and it will not be good for you. So do not do that. Either sit back, light it off with, something with a time delay on it, and, just, watch the slag from a distance, or, whatever. Now the flower pot, let's discuss that. The flower pot is there because it's ceramic. Ceramic's infamously hard to actually melt down once they're fired. You need more than 5,000 degrees to get there. So one of the most popular ways to get this whole thing done is put your thermite into the flower pot with a hole drilled in the bottom of the flower pot, or just like the drain hole open. Set the whole mess on top of whatever it is you want slagged. Whoa, I just took myself out of focus there. Let's get back. Okay, take the entire mess, put it above the thing you want slagged, set the thing off with a torch, take several steps back, and at that point, you just watch as the entire thing slags through your entire drive assemblies as you go. Now, that is, I gotta say, I've done things like that, and it's a blast. It's fast. I mean, it's all the things that pyros like me really enjoy. It's fast, it's really fun, and oh my goodness gracious me, it's thorough. So let's look at the hard drive afterwards. All right. Look, I don't care, I don't care how long the FBI, the NSA, or Drive Savers works on this hard drive. It ain't coming back. Nothing is coming off this hard drive when it's all said and done. And you got to do, honestly, you can do a stack of hard drives like that for $6 worth of materials, and, have a couple beers with your buddies afterwards. And it's honestly, it's a good evening out. So I'm going to say, that's not a bad way to go. Make sure you throw enough thermite on it to get the job done. Don't mix up a little 2-ounce packet and expect it to go anywhere. Otherwise, you'll burn through the first platter and you won't really get the effect you saw there. But it's like, honestly, pound or so of thermite, that'll do 4 drives, no problem. All right. That being said, let's say you live or work in an area where you or the wife will not let you have thermite. So what do you do? Well, all right. And this is the excuse for doing this entire segment, because again, I had 8 hard drives to get rid of, and I just wanted to burn off a little energy, but I also didn't want to spend all day at it. And so I thought, drill press hasn't been getting a lot of love lately. So let's do it that way. So what I did is I took the hard drives I want to destroy, mount them on top of my friendly drill press there, and and make sure, if you're going to do this, that you hit the round area. If you drill up the part up here, you're not hitting the disc and you're just wasting your time. But drill 1 or more holes. I understand that banks, when they're disposing of large hard drives like this, the standard in many banks is that you drill 7 holes around the whole thing. I personally, just for aesthetic reasons, made a smiley face because I dig it. But yeah, nothing's coming back from this one. I mean, look, in theory, you could. I mean, again, let's assume there's something on here that state level actors want to get you for. I mean, I've got the secrets to all the drug cartel traffic in the Western Hemisphere or something, and based on the hard drive density, there's a chance that some micron of hard drive space that wasn't vaporized by the drill bit is still readable. Well, if a state level actor wanted to get to me, and at this point you are well beyond drive savers. I mean, you're talking at the point where you need to mount a drive in a clean room and try to reconstruct it, you're already at the $1,000 range for drive recovery. But at the point when you want to do that, and in combination with a magnetic force microscopy to try to retrieve anything at all, you're running to the 5 digits and up on the whole thing. But anyway, this is perfectly fine for anyone who doesn't have 5 digits worth of money to come and try to get your data. I'd say if you want to take it that one extra step further, take the drive after you've stuck 1 or more holes in the whole thing, throw it in the bottom of your fire pit, light a bonfire, have a cigar, have a couple beers, and have a lovely day. That drive is not coming back. It will be so polluted. The magnetic fields on it will have been so confounded by the heat, the pollutants, and everything else in the whole thing. Yeah, no one's getting anything off those darn things. So anyway, those are my tips for getting rid of hard drives. Hope this was fun for people. And then we'll hit just a couple other things, and then we'll move on here, because I honestly I got to make an early night because my nose is killing me. But let's see here. Hey, Gregory says, I'm really starting to wonder how it is that Pete had done that makes him worry about going to jail for 30 years. Not saying it was me, kids. I'm just saying. There are people who made the news lately who, I don't know, sometimes just wiping it like with a cloth is not enough to keep you out of potential trouble. And just if there's something on there that, again, you devoted 30 years of your life to, or that could send you up, go the extra mile. Just saying. All right, let's see here. All right, let me see. I want to answer a couple questions here about cover submission. Let me hit the questions from the users over this thing. One question somebody sent me earlier was, what about SSDs? So the reason we're getting rid of a lot of hard drives these days is because, something like this is what's replacing them in many cases, or even the NVMe SSDs. They look a lot like a SIM. They're just a stack of chips on a thin wafer. Something like this, much, much easier. Just honestly, I would just hit this with a hammer a few times and you'd beat the crap out of the chips inside. These things have a little, 16th of an inch aluminum shell on top of it. They're not trying to armor them in any serious way. There's no moving parts on them, so they figured, why bother? You don't need to build them like a tank. You shatter the chips, the game is over. If you have an NVMe SSD and you have a decent enough paper shredder, there's a decent chance, like the kinds that can shred credit cards, I'm going to say you got at least half a chance of just shredding the darn thing right there. Those things are not coming back. Don't make too big a deal about them, but yeah, they're gone. Or as they say out here in the South, they gone. All right. Let's answer some other questions on the whole thing. Bu- 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 bu. Let's see. Okay, so Andre, yeah, we did break up the media log. I will warn you because I did do a test on this one with coming in with a database that had no newspapers at all and adding all the newspapers into them. And what happened in that case was it made a 2.2 million line log. That crashes every browser I know of, with the exception of Opera. So either say use Opera to open the log file in that case, or I would just use Notepad++. I did do a change to the way we write the logs. It's really stupid. Is I actually added a because we write all the every log line has it's called a break character in HTML. Just basically it tells it go to the next line. If you also though put in text a VBCR, I'm sorry, a CRLF, a carriage return line feed, which basically tells in text go to the next line. Then you solve the problem the text editors had with it, which is if they were trying to line wrap 2.2 million lines at once, typically they ran out of pixels somewhere in their graph port, and they would, that was what was blowing up Notepad before. Just by letting them go to a separate line solve that problem there. So it didn't get it so that your web browser wouldn't crash reading the files, but it did get rid of the problem having Notepad read it. All right, let's see here. Wow, okay, over 1,000 people downloaded his cover catalog. Right on. Yeah, that's really cool, man. Okay, so let's see here. No, and I'm not allergic to newsprint and staples. If I am, I'd be hosed. All right. What is the policy on calendars? Comic size calendars list is comics changed in magazines. Received messages should be books. I believe calendars are in books because of their lack of periodic nature. Although that's an interesting edge case because if it's a period that's a year, I'm going to stick with whatever the editors did on that one. But I think that's what has gone on that one. I think Steve's right on that one. All right, let's see. Oh, and the amazing Dodger just walked in. Dodger, you want to come on over here? Come on, buddy. Can we finally get Dodger on camera? Let's see. Oh, you can just catch the top of his head, but not really. All right. So that was a guest star. We finally have the cameo, first appearance. So ComicBase Livestream number 118. First appearance of Dodger, cameo, and audio. All right. Good to know. All right. All right, Dodger. We got it, man. All right. Let's see. Guess quantum computers. Yeah, good luck on that. All right, Dodge, buddy. All right. Ed says, is it possible to make the screensaver option in ComicBase show only the covers in your collection? Let me see about that. Cover gallery. Let's go to screensaver. I'm wondering, did we have that? Gosh, we have looked into that feature so often. I really had legitimately wondered whether we'd added it. And so now that I'm looking at the settings on it, we haven't added it. Now I got to go back through the notes and say, why didn't we add it? I think, and I'm guessing here, I'm thinking because out of the box, that means the screensaver would fail all the time on people's collections. That said, I don't know why, because over time we've added things that let you go to media that you don't have. Just going to flip over the screensaver here so people can see what the heck I'm talking about. We've added things like, what media show, and it might be media you don't have, and things like that. And we have ways the screensaver kind of recovers for that. And for instance, it'll just tell you at some point, like, hey, man, you don't have enough coverage of this type. I can't show that. So I don't know why we couldn't make that. I think that's a great suggestion, Ed. And thanks for that. Let me take that up with the people and see if anyone remembers why we didn't go there. Because I know we've talked about it. So great comment. Let me look into that. All right. And Greg Hicks wants to remind everyone, yes, we have a dedicated thread in the ComicBase message boards. We can request live stream topics and demos. Absolutely. Andre says, would it be possible to make you a report issue checklist for all the media in one report? Probably not, for the same reason we have trouble making lists of everything in one shot period. It's because it's The fundamental reason is because all the media all differ from each other in different respects. They have different fields. That said, if you can reduce the fields you're trying to report on to only the common fields, then it's possible to do it. So it's something that is in theory possible if we limit what fields we show. Um, on a more practical level, there's probably a good reason not to want to do it as a checklist, because the checklist already is one of the few reports that can get into where it passes. There's a couple hard limits in .NET, Microsoft's programming environment for developers for on Windows, where you can, if you try to concatenate a file together and it goes over, like it's some weird number like 10 gigabytes, it's just shy of there in data, you can get it so that Windows just the concat fails. And there's no documentation on it. It doesn't seem to be limited to memory. I'm guessing something in the .NET, they have some list of pointers that has some kind of firm cap on it. But I know that trying to create an issue checklist, like if I created an issue checklist for every title in ComicBase, from beginning to end, all 1.1 million issues, it would fail. It can't be done, because I mean, on a practical level, the whole thing would be like 46,000 pages. So it's not super practical as an idea. But if I try to do it for all items, all media, I think I'd just be blowing up the place. So that's I don't think it's going to happen, but it's interesting. If there's a more specific use case you can tell me about, I might be able to make that happen for you. Let me just check. All right. All right. Let's see. And someone said, Greg. Okay. Larry said, okay. Can you clarify what drives the cover submission dialogue? It's not if yours is larger. If you try to submit 2160 things, even though it's higher, it's an ask for scan. Yeah. There's a So some people have asked about submitting covers. We love your covers, and we encourage. In response to another question we got off the boards, what's the maximum we recommend anyone scanning at? And that is 300 DPI. Don't go above 300 DPI. You're fooling yourself if you do. You could make a bigger file, but you're sending me pixels that don't really exist. The reason for that is anything that's printed conventionally has a physical things like paper have an innate resolution. One thing, if you want to ever have some fun with this idea in your life, take a piece of glossy paper and a piece of plain paper and print something with a lot of really fine text on it, like little 3 and 4 point text. If you print it on the regular piece of copy paper, you'll see all that stuff is just blocky and gunky and looks like hell. And if you print it on the glossy paper, there's a certain resolution where suddenly all that stuff resolves and you can read it all. So yeah, even things like paper, due to the little bumps on them and things like that, it's not a perfectly flat surface. It's not going to lay the ink on it perfectly. So glossy paper has a higher resolution than copy paper, but all paper that's printed anywhere, you have to work within these limits when you're ever going to put ink on physical media. And when printers do it, in especially a 4-color process, cyan, magenta, yellow, and black, CMYK, what they're doing is they take something that looks like X-ray film and they image a reverse image of each part of that color of those 4 colors onto these steel plates, which they then band around a large thing, and then they start running paper through the press, and that's how after you run it through all 4 rollers, then you've got a printed page, right? When they image those X-ray things, they do them with what's called a line screen. That's printer version of basically, if you want to know how a line screen applies to a world of computer graphics, basically take double the line screen, and that's how many DPI you're talking about. So really high res stuff, like glossy magazines are printed at 133 line screen, which is to say they are the equivalent of 266 dots per inch. So anything higher than 266 DPI scan, you're kidding yourself. You're inventing pixels that aren't there. You're basically scanning the gaps between pixels that really are on the paper and ones that aren't. So it's the imperfect edges of drops of ink on the whole thing. And if you ever have a little jeweler's loupe, we used to use them back in the day. Actually, I think I still have one. Hold on. Sorry, here we are. So if you've got one of these guys, And we use them, for you to kind of put your eye up to it and you inspect print jobs, like when we had boxes printed or packaging like that, and it comes back to the factory. You can actually see it looks like a rosette pattern of how the cyan, magenta, yellow, and black lay out on the page. It's not perfect. It all kind of it intersperses around each other, and they kind of form what to your eye, when it pulls back, looks like a single dot of color. But when with the use of one of these things, you can actually see the individual components of the dots. Unfortunately, your scanner also is looking at the individual components of all the dots, and when you're scanning it higher than 266, you're just mushing it together anyway. So you're kidding yourself. Don't do it. You're just making an unnecessarily large file size. If we wanted to make an unnecessarily large file size to display an 8K monitor, we could do it just as easily just by having the computer interpolate. So there's no sense coming with a source image that is an overscan, because we can overscan it ourselves if we want. We're interested in all the real pixels you've got. We're not interested in the fake ones there in between. So I think that's about it. Let's see here. 300 dpi. Okay, yeah. So I think that's about it. And then back to Larry's original question. So with that in mind, when we go and you submit a scan, one thing that we're doing, I have no idea why I held this up. I just did. When you submit a scan, we look at we look at your image and we say, okay, you have one that is bigger than a certain amount. And then we compare it to ours. But typically it's if yours is bigger than ours, we'll say, can we have it? But we won't do that if the image we've got is already as big as we could ever use, which is it's like a number like 2160 pixels. We will in theory size them up to 3840, but we won't ask for it if we've already got one that's bigger than a certain amount. We might need to tweak that a little, possibly, but I think at the time it was based on the idea of a 233 line of a 133 line screen based on a 10-inch comic. Possibly if we start talking about things like newspapers, then I think there's an argument to be made to let them size up to 3840. But in any case, that's because that would be a 4K monitor, the full width of one. I cannot think of a reason we'd want to scan bigger than that. So anyway, that's that. But yeah, it's a good point though. I mean, I will look into that limit and make sure that there's a sound technical reason for it, especially when we're dealing with larger media. We might want to up that number a little bit. But I think that's about it. Okay, well, guys, I think that does it for me. I am knackered, but guys, hope you had fun with this one. It was an oddly specific show, and we will probably do. I'm going to try. There is a little bit of a idea behind some of the stuff. Is I do when I have an idea for what I want the show largely to be about, that's probably what the thumbnail is going to be about, because I want to make them both fun for you guys and also make it so that there's a chance in hell that someone who isn't really right in the pipe going with ComicBase, that they might get offered a chance to say, hey, did you want to know how to destroy a hard drive? If that was something that was just interesting to you one day, just to pick up more random traffic on the live streams. That said, on the things that aren't the live streams, because live streams I think are just a get together for all of us. It's just talk about things that are interesting to us. But I also very much this year want to be doing more general purpose videos about using different parts of the program, different comic related topics that are 3, maybe 4 minutes long tops, very specific, very concentrated. So also that we can start having a library of those that not only answer questions and answer things for people very quickly, but that we can point to whenever anyone has an idea of like, hey, did you know how to do this? Here's the video, bam. And so it's not this blah, blah, blah that we're doing right now, but it's a lot of very focused on stuff, on the point stuff. Of course, that relies on a lot more production on my end of things, because it's way harder making a really tight 3-minute video than it is making a big rambly hour-long video. But that's something that I'm definitely dedicated to achieving this year. All right, guys, thank you so much for attending. This was fun, and please come back. We'll do it again next week, and I'm gonna take even more nose drugs. So, all right, so we've had drugs, pyrotechnics, destroying of confidential information. What else do we need here to get ATF involved? So do we know how to have fun? I guess we'll tip back a couple of beers and we got the whole trifecta. As they say, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, it shouldn't be the name of a government agency. It ought to be the name of a convenience store. All right, guys, I'll talk to y'all later. I'll see you then. Bye-bye.